Hi, good evening. My name is Deborah Hunt. I'm second generation. I'm 63 years old. I worked at the hospital for 40 years and I've just retired 4 years ago.
My name is Charlene Pamela Hunt. I'm second generation. I worked at the Jewish General for 37 years and I'm now retired 4 years.
Hi, I'm Chantal Lattimore Durant. I'm maternally third generation and paternally more than fifth generation. And I am a senior financial associate, a financial advisor, and I spent 20 years in the medical field as well. Go ahead.
My name is Sarah. I'm 7 years old.
I'm a student in grade 1.
I'm still in grade 1.
And you're third generation.
And I'm third generation.
Good job. You want to say it again by yourself?
Do you identify as Canadian, Quebecois, or something else?
They keep asking me where I'm from. I just tell them Barbados and call it a day. You know who you are and where you came from. And you ask me the question, but it's still not good enough for you. So I don't bother. I really don't bother. I try to live good, live quiet, and that is it. But I know who I am and where I came from. And I'm thankful for all blessings that have been bestowed upon us.
Perfect. So you identify as Bajan?
Yes.
I identify myself as a Bajan, but more likely as a Canadian, not a Quebecois, because I'm born here in Quebec, but I'm not wanted. So my background is Bajan Canadian.
Same question? Yes. Oh, I identify as a Canadian. If I was to say anything else, I'm a Canadian. I don't really see any other way to identify who I am. I'm born here. My parents were born here. I have grandparents that were born here, so Canadian for me through and through. And it's regardless of whether you accept it or not, that's who I am.
What have your parents taught you about where you come from? Debbie?
Love and respect. Hold your head up. Be as good as you can be and not get in consultation with anyone, even though we know how life is and we follow those rules, even though it wasn't that easy because you would have name calling when we were going to school. But I brushed it off, hear and don't hear, to succeed and get through life.
As my mom would say, be the best person you can and love yourself. That's number one. If you don't love yourself, nobody can love you back.
So if the question is, what have your parents taught you about where you're from? Well, everything I learned about where I was from is here. I was born here. However, I got to learn all about the beautiful island of Barbados, where my grandparents were from. I got to visit multiple times and see cousins and family. So I got to see that we have a life outside of here and we also have a life here. And I learned how to respect others and to love the country I'm in and have respect and love the country where my grandparents are from.
Did you talk about your parents? You said that your mother was one of 25 that came from Barbados?
Yes. She came with, there's two that are living presently right now, Lolita Johnson and Ida Terrell. And in the books that we show the pictures, they didn't have any winter clothes. They gave them a coat and newspaper to keep the cold out of their chests, and rubber boots. And she lived on Tupper Street, which is near the Children's Hospital, which was a rooming house. And later on, she sent for my father, and they were married. And she was looking for a place where she found in the Gazette, in the Montreal Star at that time. And when she went for the place, it was in Côte St. Luc. She rang the bell, and the guy, when he opened the door and he saw her, he said, "We don't have any place." She goes, "I just saw the paper." And he shut the door, and she always said, "I kept my hand on that door, and I ring and ring," till he just got up, snatched his keys, showed her the place, And she says, I'll take it. And that was 6767 Côte St. Luc. It's a high rise now, but it was a smaller co-op place before. He came back 3 months later and asked her, are there any more people like you that pay your rent? And that is how Côte St. Luc and Walkley got so many black people, because then they all that came from the West Indies, they were able to get a place to live. From Côte St. Luc, we moved to Walkley, 5161 Walkley, apartment 21. And we had the same phone number for 60 years till my mom died.
My mom told us, just like I said, your parents makes a lot. You be kind to people, and they see the kindness in you, and you're able to give back, and you're able to get back from them.
She was a short woman, but a very strong woman. She was determined to get through anything that came her way. When they landed here in 1955, she was a full-fledged Canadian citizen. They had their papers when they came off of the plane. She worked in home, domestic work for the Norsworthies, and she kept her place, but she always said, come and learn. You don't know when I'll not be around. Come and learn. So I was the oldest out of 3 children, and I had to learn how to cook, wash, and clean. Saturdays, you lift up the mattress, you vacuum, you do all the bedrooms, then the living room, polish in between the wood vein. You don't do it any way you want. You do it the way she told you. And I learned how to cook fried chicken and rice and peas. And I don't regret anything I learned from my mom, because it carried me to where I am today. And I tried training my children the same way.
And I was the flip side. I was like the boy in the family that got my ears twisted and the beatings and the scolding. But I was the boy, and when things used to happen to my older sister, my father would say, you go out to that school and you fix them. Don't let me hear you come back and you didn't take care of those boys that are harassing my sister. So I guess I got my strength from my father, because he made 3 girls. And that's it. I've been always holding my own, and just through my parents and my father's way of that strong hand, you know. He worked at the, I think the Gazette, or
The Montreal
the
Star.
Montreal Star. He was a printer, but when he left Barbados, he was on Radio Fusion. He used to sing on the radio, so he brought that craft to Canada, and he met. And he was a printer in the Advocate. He came here, and he met a few of his friends that, you know, you have a bond and they become godparents to you and everything. And his job he picked up after the printing was the Jewish General Hospital. He did other things, but the Jewish General was where he went. And he had a first rough day, and he came home crying to my mom. I remember this. I wasn't born then, but she said, your father come home crying. And she says, what's wrong with you, Daddy? He says, they call me a nigger. And my mom says, you was a nigger? You go back and you do that job the best way you can. And from that day, my father went back to the hospital. My mom said, I will send you to nursing school. And she sent my father as a domestic worker, so my father can get all the education he can, and became a nursing assistant, and was training the orderlies on their codes and everything. And then from there, the structure of my father, we ended up having our last sister, which is Adrian. He was away on maneuvers. They call it war games. And I remember that day, I was 3 years of age. These 2 white men came to the house stating that something had happened to Mr. Wesley Hunt. And at that time, I think my father was a private or a Sergeant Hunt. Anyhow, they came to the door and they says, your father, Mr. Hunt, has been hurt. At that time, my mom was pregnant with my sister, Adrian. And we didn't get to see my father. He had degrees burns on his hands and everything. So what had transpired, they had a war game. A grenade had blown up on one of his fellow men. And he outed the fire, the grenade, with his bare hands. It was like minus 30. And he got frostbitten. And he served, I guess, 2 years at the St. Anne Hospital.
The Queen, it was called the Veterans
The
on
Veteran-
Queen Mary at that time.
And then they moved it to St. Anne Veterans Hospital. And he spent 2 years of his time getting better with his
He
hands.
couldn't feed himself, he couldn't dress himself.
So he was, yeah, so he
He
was
was
burnt
there.
badly. So then my mom made my sister, and I never forgot, we all went to the hospital, and my mom had this little baby in her hand, and he said, well, what did you have then, doll? And then she said, I had another girl. And he was like this, Hochi! My mom looked at him and says, well, what do you want me to do? Push it back up at me? Because he made 3 girls, you understand? So anyhow, that part I remember at that age, you know. And my father was like a full pledge to Canadian Army and to Canada, his queen, and to Barbados.
He got a medal from the Queen, that's where his medals came from, for saving that gentleman's life.
He always made sure that we learned a lot about being an active member of society. So it was nice because they raised us very strict, even though they were not our parents, they were our grandparents, but he raised us to understand, to have respect for others and how to dress, how to behave, and how to speak. My grandmother, I would say, I wouldn't even think that she was real. I did a project on her once when I was at Dawson. And at the end, people said to me, is your grandmother Martha Stewart? Because she was like the first Black president of the Legion, of the women's group. She took ceramics class, she did yoga, she did Tai Chi. She worked at the church to help cook meals whenever they had functions. And she taught my sister and myself and Charlene's son, Andrew, who's no longer with us, how to do ceramics. They brought us to community centers so that we would see everything. So our grandparents were so involved. Wesley and Lindahl are definitely pillars when it comes to community, and it's pillars when it comes to serving. Both of them spent their lives serving. They came here and they saw serving as a lifestyle. So they were in the Barbados House, they were always doing functions at the Barbados House. If they were part of the things to go with the Legion and the Army, they were at the dinners for the Legion and the Army. I remember meeting the Governor General at a dinner. Each of us, we didn't like it then though, and he thought it was a great thing, and he's like, each year one of you get to come with me to the big dinner at the Legion, and we're like, oh gosh, who gets to go this year? Andrew, I think it's you. But now I look back and see, yes, we were honestly always the only Black family there, but we always had such a good time because everyone respected him, and he wanted us to see that we belonged. He wanted us to see that you need to do more than just get up and care for yourself. And so it's been a pleasure to have that in my understanding. They were such a blessing to us as a society and as a family that I could just only imagine what the next generation could learn when you come somewhere and you make it your home. You don't come somewhere like you're a visitor. You come somewhere and you make it your home. Doesn't matter what people say is your home. If you know who you are and you know you pay your taxes, this is your home. So that's what I remember about them the most.
They didn't just do for themselves, they were all, and every West Indian that came to this city worked hard. They worked hard and they were well involved in the community.
What does community mean to you?
Togetherness. To help pull each other, make each other strong, which we all need. If your day is bad, you can learn from someone else to help get you up. My mom used to go to NCC to learn how to sew and meet her friends, and she talked about that. So if she didn't have that, she wouldn't have anybody else if they couldn't meet their friends, because everybody worked in-house. So there was no meeting place but at NCC Center. And we grew up, 1974 when they started NDG Center, Carl Whitaker, and it started in the basement of Shirley Mulrane's house. And then we expanded, looked for a place, was on Sherbrooke, over at that time it was called Esposito, and all the parents that had different talents helped build inside that building to make a place where we can have schooling, dancing, dance parties, and to be as one.
As my sister said, we started on Walkley with Shirley Moraine, Carl Whitaker, and my parents. And we had a place called the Clubhouse. We had the Clubhouse, and then we used to have time for the younger kids to go first. So we would go play music, dance, and do all kinds of stuff there. And then when you see 6 o'clock came, we had to go home, and we were upset because then the older teenagers, like my sister, they get to have parties, and we had the place all in tinfoil and a purple light. And then you know that purple light meant slow music was on, and they were dancing on the walls and everything. And that's how the teenagers used to counteract, like really like bring out the best of everybody. That was their time to party, you know? And then afterwards, they decided to go outside the box and purchase NDG Center, or rent NDG Center, which was on top of Cardinals. It was Steinberg's, then to Cardinals, and we were on the top part of Cardinals. And we had our community banquets. We had the Black Creative Arts Awards in 1970, where everybody from Côte-de-Neige, LaSalle, Brossard to Outremont, we got together and had one night of dancing and competition. And then at the competition, you won awards. And then it spread off into the parks in NDG Park, which is called Girard Park. And then you're featured in the park. Your creativity, your dancing, if you had Kung Fu, you had everything, and it had served everybody. We just learned how to enjoy life and run community meetings, and I don't know, like we were like everywhere. Different era now, you know?
But we took care of each other. And they did this so also that the boys wouldn't be in the wrong place. That the mentors could mentor them and make them better boys, make them stronger. And even though we would be at the clubhouse and leave, or the center, the police used to follow them when they come out, and they'd have to run home. So it's still there. Don't forget who you are, because you have to protect yourself, no matter what. Don't think because you can speak French, you're accepted and you're wanted. The shade you are is your story. We don't hound on it, but you have to know it so that you can know how to carry yourself.
Community for me means working together. And that's really, you can find community in various formats, various ways. You can have a church community, you can have a school community, you can have a community where you live. So community for me just really means people working together. Sarah?
For me, it is trying and not giving up.
Charlene, you talked about the NCC. I was wondering if you wanted to talk about the NCC, and I also know that you're on the committee to revive it.
Yeah, so the NCC, my mom, we all used to go there when we were like 12 years of age, 10 years of age. I have pictures there to show you. And we had a lot of activists. We had Mr. Siddlehall, we had Mrs. Jackson, Mrs. Griffith, and so much people, Vera Rowe that came out of it, Carl Whitaker. And our identity was to be united. And when my mom used to send me, Debbie, and Adrian, we would leave Walkley and we'll take the bus to Atwater. We ran down the hill. And when we get to the NCC Center, we felt like we were home. And everybody would go downstairs in the big basement, just how this is. And there were tables rolled off with chairs and everything. And then you'd be talking, you have people playing piano. You have Mrs. Daisy Sweeney. She was giving piano lessons. You had, the ladies had a kitchen. They would serve you French fries and hot dogs for 50 cents. And then you were downstairs waiting for your turn to go upstairs to your dance class. And that building had like 5, 6 floors. And then you had the art room, you had the carpentry room, you had the playroom, and the top of the NCC Center was the basketball, where the guys would go play basketball. And going there, everybody met. And you just felt like one. You didn't have to look at the next person's skin or anything, because there were different shades. Everybody came from blacks, but there was multiple colors, and you felt united. We need community centers. We need a community that can bring our generation, like Asara. Yes, they have dance classes, but it's not the type of dance classes that they're a part of. Sometimes you need your identity to feel that you're accepted, and then you come stronger. That's what I feel. Because when you're dealt with a lot of hardships, you become stronger, and then you can deal with the outside world. And for NCC, that made a lot of women, strong Black women. So they were able to meet. If they didn't meet at Union United Church, the building that we're in, they had a place that they went to, the Negro Community Center, where all walks of life went through those doors, and they served everybody as one.
And everybody had talent. They had talent of whatever, and they were gifted. And as I said, the West Indians, they never forgot about their family home. They would work with whatever money they got, but they always sent home. They always sent home to their mom or their grandmothers or family. So they weren't selfish people. They didn't just work and keep it in, it always was going back to help their families that weren't able to come out. So a lot of love. Everybody was on the same page and the same understanding.
What do you believe are the challenges that Black Canadians face?
The French language don't want to embrace the English. So that becomes a problem. We do exist. It's great if you have the language of triple language, Spanish, Portuguese, English, French. You're gifted if you have that. But if they don't accept you, even if you speak the one language, it's kind of hard. But you have the other countries, America, if you speak Spanish or you speak French, it's like, wow. Here, if you speak English, they're like, they look down at you. So even if you're born here and your mother tongue is English, they kind of look at a way that, I don't think you're really existing. So for me, I always existed, whether I speak the language or not. And growing up, French wasn't my mother tongue, English was, but I grew up learning Pig Latin, as I said before, a slave talk, or it was a language that we learned growing up. So when we had to talk in front of white people, we had a Pig Latin we used to talk, and we felt good because it was something how we communicated back in the 70s. And they didn't understand us. So you have people try to break codes like, what dialect are they using? But I grew up in that era. I didn't speak the French, but I spoke the dialect they had on the street. So you gain when you know multiple languages, but then you're frowned on if you can't speak the one that they want you to speak.
Everybody try. Not everybody can get it. So you shouldn't be looked like you don't exist. Because not everybody can, every job is not for somebody. So it's just like the language.
And you have to realize in our parents, if they didn't hang out with French people, they're not going to speak French. And then we were born, my sister, we didn't hang out with French people. It wasn't compulsory. It was not. So I'm grateful that my other generation, my children, and Chantel as a whiz, and they're blessed with having that mother tongue. Don't let language be a part of your failure. Just try to show people that even if they can't speak one or two languages, they're still part of society. And that's the problem with most of our Black men who don't get the chance to speak the fluent French. You know, they're looked down.
And then their jobs. Because then they can't get the job to look after their family. And they didn't do anything wrong.
There's lots of challenges here, and I can't even say it's just language, because I've heard from French people who are also Black who described to me some of the challenges they had trying to get into hospitals to work or other places. So really the challenges here are that we talk diversity, but we don't teach inclusion. It just seems to be so pigeonholed sometimes who does what. But the challenges that we face are pretty much the challenges that we create. The more we continue to divide, the more we're going to continue to be an ununited country. And I remember an eye-opening moment for me is I had an uncle that said, take political science, take political science. I was like, And I just took a course one summer, and that summer explained my entire city that I lived in. I lived in Chateauguay, and it was always a little different than LaSalle. They kind of let you know you were different. And although we moved there, we never embraced it, I will say. My mother would still feel comfortable going to NDG to do her groceries. It took her years to grocery shop there. And I can't judge, because that's where she felt comfortable, because you would go in the stores and they would stare at you and they would do things that were just awkward. And the one day I was in class and I saw we watched a video on the Oka crisis, and they actually had a straw man hung up and set him on fire. And I was like, this is like 1990. I'm like, that's the community that we still live around. Those people are probably only in their 60s now or 50s, and their 70s. And so it's very dangerous. We're not looking to have real inclusion. And if we say the word diversity and we say the word inclusion, but we do the complete opposite, theory and practice separated can only go so far. You can't tell me I'm your brother and you never treat me like one. That will only last so long. And so it's very interesting how when we look at Canada they have to face what the theory of Canada represents and what the practice of Canada represents. And when the two worlds can come together, it'll be everything that I do love about this country, because I do love being Canadian. I do love this country. However, I'm very aware that when you don't take care of the real problems, they manifest themselves in other ways. So that's the real danger I find we're going to face if we don't start speaking the truth and having inclusion.
What history in the Canadian Black community do you believe is still untold?
Chantal?
Oh, okay. So I wasn't sure which one. So when I saw the question, I love it because I think all the stories are untold. They're not told, when I say untold, they're told within families, but they're not told on the outside. So I think that there's so much stories to share with everyone. It should be a part of the schooling. It should be a part of educational system, so people understand how not just Black families, but all the cultures that are here have a story. And so when you actually talk about unity, when you actually talk about, multiculturalism, it's actually multicultural. You include everybody in the story. So to me, all the stories are untold. The stories of how people came to Canada all the way back, way before. Like you have the stories of, I think, DaCosta Hall. People don't understand where the name DaCosta Hall came from. And that's talking about, I think, 1600s or 1700s. So to me, none of the history is actually shown. So all the stories are pretty much, if you ask me, untold. But they're not there. If you actually go and do research, there's lots of Black Canadian authors who've made books and who talk about various stories. It's just that it's not taught. So you have to take it upon yourself outside of, the educational system to go and educate yourself. They're not unwritten or undocumented, they're just unshared. So they're not being part of the, I don't know if I have the right word, but they're not being part of the greater society. So I'm looking forward to the years ahead, because nothing can stay in the dark forever. So although it's been untold, I know it won't be forever.
And also with our government, they're the ones that don't want the truth to come out. So sometimes when you see people like the Black Lives movements that started just not too long ago, it was their way of releasing a lot and try to educate people that, the same kind of things happen in Canada, Quebec, They would spend more time filming tragedies and things that happen in the States. But you have the same violence, the same things that are happening right here. Sometimes it doesn't even make the news. They don't put the interests in the same place where we're born here. And they don't put the interests of the same people that are living the crisis. You understand? When I was growing up, I was taught mostly Canadian history. I don't even remember anything. The Iroquois, the Battle of Hastings. What does that do with me now? Like, those are the things that I kind of remember. But the history that I was taught during Black Day Camp was about La Bamba, Marcus Garvey, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. We had Angela Davis. We used to sing her songs. We are hearing the Afros in the 70s. We had the Black Power movement. Like, that's the era I grew up knowing my Blackness, like say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. We had the James Brown, we do the scuffle and everything. We were so into ourselves in the 70s, going into the 80s. So my whole life was like knowing my identity, like be proud, and we all had our afros and then the afro puffs, and then if you put the elastics on, your hair started to shrink more. You didn't have your afro puff, you had one ponytail. But like those things I can tell because we went through it. But I learned a lot. We had Stokely Carmichael. He was from Trinidad, and he came to Montreal. Actually, he went to the States, and he came to the NCC Center, and must have been, I think, 15 or 14 when he came, and he spoke about yourself, your pride. And he changed his name from Stokely Carmichael back in the days to Kwame. And if you go and you Google it in Trinidad, they have a Kwame center, agriculture center and everything in Stokely Carmichael's name. And he was one of the blacks that I looked up to. Like, he just told me my identity and just be proud of who you are. And then we had Angela Davis. They were all coming over, but then they started to stop the Black Panther movement. People coming from the States to Montreal, because Montreal was the heartthrob of everything. Not Toronto, not Vancouver, it's Montreal. So we had the Black Panther movement started to come here to tell us about our identity. And we learned a lot, but we learned a lot of the American history, not our own Canadian. I know my past through family and through black people talking, but nothing through the government. I don't think that would ever happen. Something has to take place, and I guess by you filming and having people talk about history, that is when you're going to start getting the movement going on. And more people, you're going to have them talk and let them know where they stand and what was their past that they brought to the future. You know, so that's basically it.
She talked about hair. And when I was going to school, my mom braided my hair in squares and put the ribbon on. And they want to know how my hair stuck like that. Like, you're accepted with the hairstyle you have now. Growing up back then, you had to look a certain way. If not, you didn't get the job you thought you had. You could have the papers, the education there. You didn't get that job. Everything was looked upon. Everything. You were different. It's like you were out of space. My teacher in grade 5 asked me how come my legs didn't match my face, and I had on black pantyhose. You talk about ignorance, but it never harbored in me. It's just hearing the stories that I recall what I went through. If not, where would I be?
Well, it's nice. There's a lot of rich history, though, when you actually do the studies.
I learned a lot about Black history.
Where do you learn about Black history?
Because it teaches me more and who I am.
And where did you learn that? Don't know. How about you say TV and movies?
Movies
And at school?
and at school.
The important thing about Untold Stories is when you continue to stay marginalized, then what happens is society continues to marginalize you. And so I will be jumping a bit, but I remember in one of the questions, it's, ask you about experiences, but when you marginalize, then in society feels they can marginalize. So you will end up having issues in every area of life, whether it's education. Like for myself, if I had to see a doctor, I explained the story that happened before, but with the nurse, but I've seen a doctor, but there's a difference between unknowing and knowing. So I seen a doctor who asked me my family history, but when I said Canadian and I kept going down that route, and he was like, by any chance is your father Caucasian? I was like, not that I'm aware of, and he wasn't sure if I was being on, and I said, no, I do know my father, and my father's a Black Canadian. And he was more like, oh wow, I don't know much about that. And there was an interest, a genuine interest, I'd like to know more. And then you have others there's just ignorance. They don't want to know more, and it's kind of like a disbelief. So when the stories aren't told, then in society, when you're in the hospital and you're a minority, they will treat you differently. And luckily, a lot of people who have worked in hospitals are multicultural now. It wasn't always like this before. And the care you get is not the same, because that same treatment that is taught to marginalize you on the outside, it ends up happening and reproducing itself in the education system, ends up reproducing itself in the medical system. So that's why the stories is not just so that we can know our history. It's so that we can be a part of the greater society. Because when people don't know and they look at you like an alien, they will treat you like an alien. Even though you yourself know who you are and you have enough confidence, you have to make sure that your stories are told so that people know that you are people. It's from one generation to another, people will continue to make it seem like you don't matter, and you do matter. Okay.
What dreams do you hold for the future generations, and do you have a message for them?
To continue to strive to the top. At least you all could see Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, and he got there, and you all can get to where you want to be. Just don't let anybody hold you back. I'm proud of my daughters for where they reach and what they know, and it's giving them that, and then to see them pass that on to their children. We are somebody and will always be somebody, and stand up for our rights.
For me, I would like to see justice in the legal system with our black men. A lot of them don't get second chances, and I can speak by experience. And I wish society was able to embrace every mother or even father that loses somebody. They take the time to soul search the family before they put the negativity out, because that also breaks a family and a community. That when things happen in our black community, you look for the worst things to talk about that individual. And then that individual's parents, they may not have a clue or anything that transpired, and their child is, gunned down, life. And then you leave that parent scarred. There's not everything a parent knows about a child, and when they do know, they're involved. But society has a way to make you feel that you are to blame. And we need a community that can lift every parent up and show the empathy. And the people who are running this country, just like the indigenous, the empathy on them and how they treat them. And when you hear they have all these multiple graves, you'll raise the flag and lower the flag, and the next day you go on to something else, like they're just pieces of wood you chip. They're human. We are involved in life every day, and we just need that hug, the hug of feeling comfortable and accepted, no matter what legal ways we are involved, but to have that acceptance. Whether you're black, Asian, or indigenous and a crime has occurred, we need to feel that we're part of still society and not blamed and like we're discarded, and we have to literally fight our way to get a justice system.
Well, for the future generations, we often say your future is now, because everything that's taking place now, you're here so that you can make changes so things can be better in the future. I do hope that real diversity and real inclusion does happen, where you can see someone who speaks different, looks different, talks different, walks different, and treat them like they are a person. We are all created in God's image, and it's just funny how some of us will quote certain things from the Bible from various groups and still treat people like they're not people. So I really do hope that we go into the future, and I do believe it's going to happen, that we're going to go into the future and that people are going to see the world that they know can exist, but not dream about it, live it. So if you're in a position and you are a boss and you're hiring people, give someone that chance that may not look like you. A lot of people have the positions they have because someone in their family had that high position. So I do hope that you get to see more cultural diversity at every level. We need to be in every area, not just black people, all people. I will go to conventions, and my sister in her field, she'd be at conventions, and you'd find yourself be the only one. We're in 2000 and something, and you're still the only one doing certain things. So it would be very nice to see more cultural diversity in all types of careers, all types of jobs, all types of institutions. So something as regular as the bank. You want to be able to see Black bankers, which you're seeing more now. But I'd love to see in the future, it's not about color, it's just about inclusion, and give everyone that chance. Because what people don't know is when you are not given an opportunity, you have generational things that occur. And it's not to make excuses, but sometimes it's from one generation to the next that family can be in that same situation because they never get a hand up. I do pray that my children and my children's children grow up in a place where they're not looked at as different. They're looked up as, you know, equals. Equals in partnership, equals in working, and given those opportunities. So for the future, I do see a bright future ahead because I know that these stories being told and what you guys are doing are not going to go unheard, and that the truth always finds its way to come out. But the truth can't just be a story. It has to be how we live our life. So I do hope that future generations of all walks of life find a way to include people in everything, in every aspect. When you have a birthday party, when you go to school, there just seems to be something. When you leave kindergarten and you leave elementary, there seems to be a switch in high school. Those kind of things, I love to see cultural inclusion. So I do hope that the next generation looks at how we may be different, but doesn't mean that we can't be together. And that's what I do hope for the future generation.